Okay, this is Jason Karczewski, and I am presenting my Ignite presentation. The question I'm asking is formative assessment right for you? Well, if you have read the text in any way, shape, or form, I think you probably know the answer, which is, of course it is. Formative assessment is best practice. It helps all students improve, and that's what it's all about, improvement. So what is formative assessment? Well, formal and informal processes that teachers and students use to gather evidence for the purpose of informing next steps in learning. This is what it's all about. It is dynamic because it results in students finding out what they did well and what they need to improve and how to close the gap. So the questions to ask yourself as you do this are who, what, and how. Who are my students that are showing progress? Who are my students who are not understanding the lesson? What adjustments must I make? How should I group students differently? A question comes to mind about whether or not a tree that falls in the forest actually makes a sound. If you're giving feedback to your students but they're not changing their behavior, then the question is, was feedback given? Never has a single letter said so little. This is a quick pitch on my part to reconsider letter grades. That A+ and that F are not good practice when it comes to formative assessment. What those represent are both summative assessment. They don't tell students how to get better. And never has one little letter done so much harm. Now, of course, you look at this, and we've used letter grades forever. How does it do harm? Well, it shifts kids' perspective toward being a completion perspective kind of thinker. And that makes them focused on the grade and on getting things done instead of actually learning. Does assessment need to be like this? Endless paperwork, slow feedback, disappointing results. I give it a big thumbs down. It does not need to be like this anymore. There's no reason for it to be like this anymore because we now have technology to give us an assist. So currently we have available to us things like Kahoot, Socrative, Flubaroo, Padlet, and many, many more. These pieces of technology can help us to grade quickly. Strengths and weaknesses, it can reduce the time required to score assignments, it can let you sort data quickly, and you can get immediate feedback to your students if you have it set up that way. It's hard to do on the fly. If you don't have technology, it's obviously going to be an encumbrance, and then it will require a lot of upfront time on your part to make these things effective. What makes feedback effective? This is the question we really need to examine because poorly done feedback does not help the students to grow, and it can really be demoralizing and disappointing to them. So we need to have a critical understanding of what it means to give good feedback. First, it focuses on the goal with feedback, highlighting strengths and weaknesses. So successful feedback options and then next step feedback options. You've got two categories to consider. Well-meaning teachers can actually cause problems with praise. It can be interpreted by students as a personal judgment by the teacher toward the student. Praising intelligence can make learners risk-averse, and praise handled badly can actually result in students taking on a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset. What happens when we want to give students feedback? We need to make sure that it happens when there's time to actually act on it. Before grading, it needs to take place in the middle of instruction, and we need to give students the perception that it is okay to make mistakes because they're growing and improving. That's the growth mindset. We need to address partial understandings. This is challenging. It's a moment when the student could either have to go back to the drawing board in terms of instruction and you're going to reteach, or it could be that you give them just that right question or right hint and they move on. It's a critical moment, though. One thing it does not do the thinking for the student. You need to keep it rigorous for the student to grow and improve. Here are some suggestions. Try questioning the student and try offering discovery tasks. If the student makes the connection him or herself, the growth will be much better. Avoid over-feedback and under-feedback. Limit the advice to what the student can act on. Focus correction areas in writing will help teachers who have to teach writing, and we all do that. Specify parts of the rubric for the student to consider, and then also keep in mind that every student is different, and some of them can handle many correction areas, and some of them will only be able to handle a few. Self-assessment is very important. Students are going to need to be trained on this. They don't do it naturally. You need to normalize them by sharing your feedback and comparing it with their feedback. And the students really need to understand the criteria for success, so they need strong and weak examples to look at. Self-assessment and justification. Now, justification is when you go beyond just a simple checklist. Self-evaluation is going to need careful consideration. It requires evidence, and there are fantastic ideas in the book, pages 152 through 157. Goal setting and action planning are going to be very important. You need to have students self-assess themselves in terms of their strength and knowledge when they take a pre-test. Goal setting is going to be important. You want to give them challenging, difficult goals because then they will put forth real effort. And you need to work with them on creating a where and a when. When students have a where and a when, they become more conscious, and there is a link with an if-then kind of feedback loop in their mind. Speaking of feedback, I think one of the major things in this book was the feedback loop and ways that we could make it better for students and help them grow as individuals focused on learning.